The Prophecies of Zechariah 14 continued. Text of presentation by V.T. Houteff, Sabbath, December 21, 1946, Mount Carmel Chapel, Waco, Texas. I shall read from Mount of Blessings, page 174, beginning with the first paragraph. The title of this reading is, Thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory. Quote, the last, like the first sentence of the Lord's Prayer, points to our Father as above all power and authority and every name that is named. The Savior beheld the years that stretched out before his disciples, not as they had dreamed, lying in the sunshine of worldly prosperity and honor, but dark with the tempests of human hatred and satanic wrath. Amid national strife and ruin, the steps of the disciples would be beset with perils, and often their hearts would be oppressed by fear. They were to see Jerusalem a desolation, the temple swept away, its worship forever ended, and Israel scattered to all lands, like wrecks on a desert shore. Jesus said, Ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. Nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines, and pestilence, and earthquakes in divers places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Yet Christ's followers were not to fear that their hope was lost, or that God had forsaken the earth. The power and the glory belonged unto him whose great purposes would still move on unthwarted toward their consummation. In the prayer that breathes their daily wants, the disciples of Christ were directed to look above all the power and dominion of evil, unto the Lord their God, whose kingdom ruleth over all, and who is their Father and everlasting friend. The ruin of Jerusalem was a symbol of the final ruin that shall overwhelm the world. The prophecies that received a partial fulfillment in the overthrow of Jerusalem would have a more direct application to the last days. We are now standing on the threshold of great and solemn events. A crisis is before us, such as the world has never witnessed. And sweetly to us, as the first disciples, comes the assurance that God's kingdom ruleth over all. The program of coming events is in the hands of our Maker. The majesty of heaven has the destiny of nations as well as the concerns of his church in his own charge. The divine instructor is saying to every agent in the accomplishment of his plans, as he said to Cyrus, I girded thee, though thou hast not known me. End quote. The disciples expected Jerusalem to become the capital of God's great kingdom, but contrary to their expectations, Jesus proclaimed that Jerusalem would become a desolation and the temple a ruin. Thus, again and again, we are led to see that we finite beings never know God's plans. Indeed, we need His Spirit to lead us on, and to point out the right way at every turn as we journey onward to the kingdom. Let us now kneel, that the knowledge of these truths will make us all that we ought to be. I shall ask Sister Vanoy Smith to lead us in prayer, and Brother Oliver Hermanson to follow. I shall close. Zechariah 14. Last Sabbath we concluded our study with verse 11, and now in order to connect today's study with last Sabbath's, we shall briefly review the events concerning Jerusalem as predicted in the first 11 verses of this chapter. The first prediction is a war against Jerusalem in which all nations shall be involved. In that war, a part of the people in Jerusalem will go into captivity, but the rest will remain in the city. Moreover, in that day the Lord's feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, and the mountain shall cleave toward the east and toward the west, making a great valley. Then to this valley of the mountains, to the place where the Lord's feet shall stand, the people of God shall flee as hastily as does one when fleeing from an earthquake. Jerusalem shall be re-inhabited. Evidently, those who are not cut off, but who are left in Jerusalem in the day of battle, are the faithful ones who were living in the city. And those who flee to the valley are faithful ones who gather into Jerusalem from elsewhere. Jerusalem then shall become the great gathering place for God's people. These are some of the things revealed in our last Sabbath study of the first part of chapter 14. These events, as any Bible student should readily see, are premillennial, for the people do not descend into the valley, but they flee to it. Now let us continue with the 12th verse. Verse 12. Quote, "And this shall be the plague wherewith the Lord will smite all the people that have fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall consume away while they stand upon their feet, and their eyes shall consume away in their holes, and their tongue shall consume away in their mouth." End quote. We were told in a previous verse that the Lord is to fight all who fight against Jerusalem. And now, in this verse, we are told what means the Lord will employ in that warfare. He is not to use man-made weapons, but instead he sends this horrible plague as their punishment. Verse 13, quote, "And it shall come to pass in that day that a great tumult from the Lord shall be among them, and they shall lay hold every one on the hand of his neighbor, and his hand shall rise up against the hand of his neighbor." End quote. Besides the plague, there shall be a great tumult, a confusion and excitement that will turn every man against his neighbor. Thus shall the Lord defeat them. Verse 14, quote, "And Judah also shall fight at Jerusalem, and the wealth of all the heathen round about shall be gathered together, gold and silver and apparel in abundance, in great abundance, rather." End quote. During this conflict of the nations, the kingdom of Judah will be restored. She also shall fight at Jerusalem, and shall gather to herself the wealth of the heathen. Verse 15, quote, "And so shall be the plague of the horse, of the mule, of the camel, and of the ass, and of all the beasts that shall be in these tents, as this plague." End quote. The plague, then, shall be not only among men, but shall also be among the beasts that are found in the tents of the heathen. Verse 16, quote, "Then it shall come to pass that every one that is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem shall even go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles." End quote. This sentence of Scripture emphatically implies that all who are at that decisive time refuse to be converted to the Lord shall perish. Only those who worship the Lord at Jerusalem on the Feast of Tabernacles will be spared. Verse 17, quote, "And it shall be that whoso will not come up out of all the families of the earth, even unto Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, even upon them shall be no rain." End quote. All who do not then worship the King, the Lord of hosts, will have no rain. It will be withheld from them in order that they may fully realize their mistake. Moreover, not only those who shall fight against Jerusalem, but even all the families of the earth shall be thus sifted as wheat. Verse 18, quote, "And if the family of Egypt give not up and come not, that have no rain, there shall be the plague wherewith the Lord shall smite the heathen that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles." End quote. If the drought fails to awaken them, then the plague will finally take them. Thus all who have not heard the three angels' messages will be given opportunity to hear them. Now we see that this event, the Lord's standing on the mount, and the saints fleeing to the valley, is not only premillennial, but even pre-probationary. That is, the reestablishment of the house of Judah, that it lightens the earth with the glory of the angel, Revelation 18:1, that it brings the world to its end, and that the end of the world, in this instance, is the end of the unrepentant wicked. Verse 19, quote, "This shall be the punishment of Egypt, and the punishment of all nations that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles." End quote. Again we see that our preconception of the final work of the gospel and of the means by which the world will be brought to its end is shattered, as are all human theories, practices, and ideas. No, the Lord will not drop upon the world like a bolt from the sky. He will first magnify His word, His power, and His righteousness. He is also to have, as it were, an ark of safety into which He will gather His people and shield them. These facts, we see, are vividly borne out in this prophecy. Verse 20, quote, "In that day shall there be upon the bells of the horses holiness unto the Lord, and the pots in the Lord's house shall be like the bowls before the altar." End quote. Bells on horses serve no other purpose than to help their masters locate them. Thus it will be that only those servants whose bells sound holiness unto the Lord will the Lord recognize as His. The pots into which the offerings of the Lord are put are to be like the bowls before His altar. Verse 21, quote, "Yea, every pot in Jerusalem and in Judah shall be holiness unto the Lord of hosts, and all they that sacrifice shall come and take them, and seethe therein, and in that day there shall be no more the Canaanite in the house of the Lord of hosts." End quote. People have brought, and still do bring, an offering in almost anything, clean or unclean. But at that time the offering they bring will in itself be clean, and the container of the offering will, as shown in verse 20, be like the bowls before the altar, acceptable unto the Lord. In that day the heathen, the unconverted, shall be excluded from the house of the Lord. It must be that we are on the verge of witnessing the fulfillment of these prophecies, else the scroll would not have been unrolled so far as to disclose these prophecies as they are seen today. Certainly not. If the Spirit of truth alone leads into all truth, and if the Lord gives meat in due season, it must be that as soon as these good tidings of peace reach those who are candidates for the first fruits of the house of Judah, as soon as they perform their vows and realize that the wicked shall no more pass through them, see that he is utterly cut off, just that soon these promises that were made and sealed centuries ago are unsealed now, will be fulfilled. In view of this, let us wholeheartedly do God's bidding and act out our faith in His never-failing word. Zechariah 14, as you see, briefly states the final work of God both for the saints and for the sinners, for the kingdom of Judah and for the world. We must not, however, conclude that Zechariah tells everything that is to take place. His predictions, as the predictions of any of the prophets, in themselves are incomplete. It takes all of the prophets as a unit to tell the whole truth. Other prophecies and events are therefore chronologically sandwiched in Zechariah's prophecies. Moreover, according to the spirit of prophecy, verse 4 of chapter 14 has an indirect application. That is, in the end of the millennium, the Lord's feet will again stand on the Mount of Olives.